Hey guys, welcome to the Drone Horizon podcast. I'm Alex, and today I'm joined by Phil Harris. Phil, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm Phil Harris. I'm a commercial drone operator based in the UK, mostly working sort of TV, film, branded content.
Cool. Well, thanks for taking time out of your day to chat with us today. Obviously, things are a little bit different for you. So normally we have drone photographers on, but you're obviously more of a commercial pilot. You do stuff for TV and film and that kind of thing. So the shots I've asked you to send over are more behind the scenes shots, which obviously then have things to go along with them. So we'll start by talking about the Iceland shot that you've sent over. So what's the story behind this one?
Yeah, so this was in April 2017, I think it was. And it was for a friend of mine. He was doing a passion project. So it wasn't a job as such, but it was filming like a music video out in Iceland on the sort of about an hour outside of Hof. There's Skarfsfell, it's like a national park, big old glacier. And it was sort of like it was a bit of a trek out there. It was like maybe like an hour or two hike. And when I say hike, it's not because of it's a big distance. It was just you're sort of roped it. We had Stu, our sort of mountain guide leader. He's based in Wales. He sort of takes us up there. You're with ice picks, and you're all sort of roped into each other because there are fair size crevasses, like gaps that you don't want to be falling down. So yeah, it took a couple of hours to get out there. It's probably only about a mile or two out, but yeah, get out and you've got to take obviously all your food and drink and stuff with you because there's no Deliveroo or catering van that's going to be out on the glacier. This is where not that I've seen it, but so I'm told the Interstellar film was some of the scenes were shot there. But yeah, good challenge. Temperatures obviously low being on a glacier, so sort of wrapped up warm, keeping batteries warm. This was flying the Inspire 2, so thankfully they've got the sort of self-heating batteries, which was pretty handy. But yeah, kudos to Julia, who was she was the dancer. I'll send you some photos you can put up. She's wearing this really thin, hardly anything dress in the freezing cold, and she's dancing around on this ice. A lot of the time, with these shoots, you're not actually dancing around, you're not actually moving, it's just sort of waiting around and waiting between cuts. So yeah, it was cold, and some of the shots she was sort of lying down on the ice, bare skin on ice. I don't know how she did it. Pretty incredible. But yeah, that was a good shoot to remember in terms of a crazy environment. I've been out there quite a few times, and that was definitely the highlight of times being able to shoot in Iceland for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sort of with general TV and filming and that kind of thing, I can imagine there's quite a lot of waiting around sort of involved in it anyway. But obviously being out in the temperatures that you were, it's even more painful standing there in the freezing cold. I noticed that obviously there's the guy next to you, he's got a DJI remote as well. So were you flying dual operator for that?
That's right, yeah. So that's with the DJI Inspire 2-man op. So I had my mate Kez with me, he was on the camera, and then I was there piloting. So yeah, operating as two separate systems, one person piloting, one person on the camera. So they act independently, so the camera can be looking wherever in relation to the drone, and it works pretty well just for getting smooth dynamic stuff. It's also safer as well, which means the pilot only has to be focusing on where the drone is, whereas the camera op just looking where the camera's going.
Yeah. So do you normally do just the drone op, or do you sort of change depending on what the role of the role is for the filming?
Yeah, I'd say about 90% or 95% of my stuff is piloting rather than camera operating, just because that's what I'm better at. Stick to your strengths. I know a bunch of fantastic camera operators, so I'll use them as and when. But yeah, on the odd occasion, I do camera operate.
And obviously, I noticed with your remote as well, you've got a screen in front of you. So am I right in thinking that the Inspire 2 has a camera, like a fixed camera built into the front of it as well, so you can still see forwards?
Yeah, that's right. So you've got like what they call the FPV camera. It's pretty shocking, really, in terms of the quality that's on it for such a fairly pricey rig. But yeah, you've got this FPV camera which is fixed facing forward. It does try to counteract your roll, so the horizon stays still, but it basically means that as the pilot, I can always see what's in front of the aircraft at any time, like no matter where the camera operators are looking at their camera. So it's particularly handy if you're beelining towards say like an object, like a tree or a wall or something, and you're like, 100 meters away. At 100 meters, your depth perception has really gone to pot. So it can be difficult to see, to judge how far away the aircraft is from an object if the drone is between you and the obstacle. So it's pretty handy for that. It's also good for knowing your mark as well. Like, if you need to stop at a particular line, even if it's not a hard object, if you want to just know where your endpoint is, it's pretty good for that, especially when it comes to with the rules and regs saying you need to keep 50 meters or so from public. It's good to be able to see, judging how far away you are from a road or a path.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose obviously where you're handing complete control over, where you've maybe gone from flying sort of more prosumer stuff like the Phantoms and etc., like you're used to being able to see and fly rather than just fly. I can imagine sort of going to just flying can be quite difficult if you didn't have that FPV.
Yeah, and a lot of it is about communication as well. So yeah, you say going from in a way doing both piloting and camera operating can be easier, just because you're only having to sort of talk with yourself. You're only having to sort of communicate with yourself about what the shot is and how to achieve it. Whereas with a camera operator, you need to be sort of on the same wavelength on how you're going to achieve these shots.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just sort of moving on to your second picture. Obviously, I know you was briefly touched on sort of communication and that kind of thing, and obviously sometimes communication you do need the sort of the headpieces, which you do see some people wearing on sort of more commercial films and that kind of thing. So the shot from Jordan, do you want to talk us through why you sent this one over?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, this shoot wasn't crazy in terms of like what it was for. So it was filming for a documentary. It was in a refugee camp, just about an hour northeast of Amman in Jordan, just near the Syrian border. It's called Zaatari Refugee Camp, and I went out there. Not really. I knew we were filming at this refugee camp, but I didn't know anything about it. Like I sort of in my head, I just thought, it was just a refugee camp as we see online or on the news or whatever, where it's just these sort of temporary tents. But it was quite it's been up there since 2012. It's quite a permanent base now. It's a fair size. It's 2 square kilometers. 2 square kilometers. 2 square miles, and it's got 80,000 people in that area, so it's it's tight. But the conditions I was surprised at how sort of good they are. Like it's an incredible achievement what the Jordanian government and the United Nations have sort of put together to create there. It's got schools and hospitals, shops, barbers. It's a well catered for. Not to say they're having a good time over there, but it definitely opened my eyes to what things can be like, and not just to sort of jump to assumptions really.
So were you out there filming the documentary about the refugee camp?
Yeah, so it's part of a longer series. I think it's a Warner Brothers documentary which is filmed over 4 years or something. So I have no idea when it's going to come out. But yeah, it's a 4-year project. I think it's following families going through the refugee system. I believe that's what it was about.
So you chose this one just purely because obviously it sort of opened your eyes as to what things could be like, and obviously the different way of life.
Yeah, it was just quite a cultural shot really, but in a good way. Not all these shoots are about getting a cool shot as such, but this was definitely one that sort of changes you, I guess, slightly as a person and opens your eyes a bit. But you're saying from the drone side, the technical standpoint, yeah, again with this with the Inspire 2, so I had Jason on the left there, who's my camera operator, and using the headsets he was saying about, I wasn't going to take them on the shoot. We're only usually using them for where we have to choreograph stuff in terms of timing with my camera operator, especially if you can't hear each other usually. So we definitely use them on like car commercials, or say if you're doing like a venue that's particularly loud and it's harder to hear each other, rather than just shouting to each other. The headsets are pretty handy. But I sort of took this. I'm not sure why I bought them on this job really. However, I'm glad I did, because you got hundreds of kids running and screaming towards you because they're just so excited. This drone is flying around, and it's pretty exciting for them, which is understandable. But yeah, they are screaming, so it's hard to hear each other. Whereas with the headsets, it's just a lot easier to hear each other, and it means that I can go 100 meters away and still just be talking at a regular sort of level without having to yell to Jason, grab the ND filters or anything. And it just makes things a lot easier and a bit more stress free, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, drones, regardless of where you are in the world, drones still attract attention. I mean, sometimes it's good attention and sometimes it's bad attention, but you'll always turn heads. And obviously, being sort of surrounded by kids, I can imagine that was probably quite exciting for them.
Yeah, that was the other part of it. Like, it's such a mixed responses with drones. Like Syria in particular, we had a chap from the military, from the army, who had to escort, because drones was essentially banned out there, and we had, yeah, a bit of a hoo-ha trying to get through customs with the drone as we flew into Oman, and then we had a chap from the military who had to escort us around. Escort us. He had to escort the drone. He had to be with the drone 24 hours, including overnight. So we'd go to the hotel and I'd give him the drone and stuff. So it'd have to be in his possession. He was pretty chill with me being able to keep up the batteries and stuff, just to be able to logistics of charging stuff overnight. But yeah, the aircraft and controllers had to stay under his watchful eye, which was a bit scary on the first day, as I'd only just met him an hour before, and I'm giving him not just one but both. I've got two Inspires just to have one as a backup, and I'm giving them both to him and just hoping that I see him the next morning when he said he'll be at the hotel to pick us up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I suppose when you're going to sort of film commercially and that kind of thing, and you've got the backing of like a production team and that kind of thing with you, I suppose it's probably a little bit, the government maybe are a little bit more open to hearing your side of it. But, you know, any sort of consumer taking their drone in to the country for, you know, just flying it around to take some pictures, I think they probably have maybe a different story.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, there's a fair bit of sort of negotiation and paperwork that goes into it, and you have your local, what they call like a fixer, so someone who's based out there in the area that you're filming, and they sort of help with sort of, yeah, negotiating your permits and stuff, and also helping just with logistics, with, you know, even just basic things like having a like a translator for you to help with communication. It's pretty handy.
So in this particular shoot, was there, other than obviously the local person, was it all sort of team members that had been flown into the country, or were you using local staff as well in conjunction with yourself?
In terms of the film crew itself, it was all UK based crew, and then yeah, we did have the sort of locals that would assist us, but no, mainly just, yeah, UK crew.
Cool. So just moving on to your third shot now, which is probably the saddest shot out of the three. Do you want to talk us through what happened to this poor drone?
Yeah, so this was this is June 2019. Yeah, I wanted to put this picture in there just because I think everyone appreciates a little crash story, and this was one like no other that I had before. So it was a local job to me at the time. I was living down in Brighton on the south coast of the UK, and we were flying. It was sort of the penultimate shot of the day. We're just filming these. It's for filming these coaches going along the south coast, and we're just sort of tracking them going along the seafront road. And we were flying over this sort of stretch of water, the sea, and got the shots. Coming back into land, we were about sort of 300 meters away at this point when I decided to turn back. And as I'm coming back, I noticed these two birds sort of just come out of nowhere. Just little birds, not seagulls. Seagulls I'm scared of because they're big and they'll, you know, dive on you and stuff. But it's these small little like starling-sized birds, so nothing particularly concerning. But, you know, nonetheless, it's a hazard. So I was like, okay, I'll drop the altitude a bit and I'll pick up the speed. But then I think what they saw it as a game, and they were like, right, game on. He's ducking and diving. Let's chase him. So they do exactly that. And I'm like, okay. And then, yeah, they're flying alongside it. And then one just sort of swoops into the side. It clips the propeller. And the bird sort of like flutters away. Yeah, he didn't get knocked out of the sky, but I think he probably, yeah, suffered some sort of wounds. But yeah, drone propeller gets clipped, so it just chips it a bit, but then it starts, because once it's sort of out of balance, once the propellers are out of balance, they just start shaking themselves apart. So at first it was, you know, the aircraft didn't come out the air straight away, spinning around, and it started spinning around, and then all of a sudden it just sort of threw itself apart, the propeller, the motor, and it just went down into the drink. So it sort of dropped about 50 foot into the sea. But then obviously, as you can see from this photo, that's not where it ended. Because I was local, I was thought, it'd be good to see if I can get it back. Not that, it's salt water, it is a write-off, but I think I felt so frustrated that it was only about 100 meters off from the shoreline. And I was like, okay, I'll see if I can get it. The client was super chill. Like I said earlier about having like a backup driver, I had a backup Inspire in the car, but I was reserved about using it just because I knew that I had, back-to-back days after this job of other jobs that I need the Inspire for which, the first couple of days I won't have a backup Inspire, which always makes me feel a bit uncomfortable. So yeah, I was with Dan, my camera operator, and we grabbed some wetsuits and snorkels, and we're like, all right, let's get in and see if we can find this thing. Go back down there and start sort of. We knew where it went in from, sort of visually where it dropped in, but we also had the GPS, the overlay from the DJI Go app saying where your flight path was, where it was last seen. So I went in and started systematically checking where it went in, taking into account where the tide may have sort of thrown it in. And about an hour in, I was sort of counting down, the last 10 dives, and then I'll give up. And then got down to the bottom, just dropping down about 4 meters deep at this point, that's sort of my limit of sort of free diving. I'm not a free diver by any stretch, and the visibility is terrible. Visibility is like a meter or so. So I can't, once I'm down on the sea floor, I can't see too far, and you're wearing these goggles, so your peripheral vision is just next to nothing. And then all of a sudden I spot it, sort of scream underwater, realize that I can't breathe underwater, so I'm like, keep it in, grab it, bolt up, and that photo was taken shortly after that.
So was the footage recoverable at the end of that, or did you have to reshoot all the footage again?
It was, yeah. Well, from the micro SD card, so it shoots onto a SSD and a micro SD card. The micro SD card. So what I didn't realize is those things are bomb-proof, basically. I looked into it afterwards to see how much they can handle when people put them in microwaves and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, the micro SD card survived despite being in salt water. When I got back, I sort of threw everything in the bath and ran clean, regular tap water over it just to try to get rid of any salt to stop any further corrosion. But obviously most of the damage is done already. But yeah, the micro SD card survived.
So with the Inspire, obviously you mentioned that it shoots both onto the SSD and the SD card. Is that the same quality onto both of them, or does it sort of prioritize the SSD and then the SD card is just sort of a backup?
Yeah, so the micro SD card is what they call when you're shooting onto both you don't have to shoot onto both, but when you're shooting ProRes or RAW, you're shooting onto the SSD. And when you're shooting onto the SSD, it will then create a proxy file, so like a low quality version. It can still be a 4K file or so, but the bit rate is so small it's not usable really for anything of quality.
Yeah. So was anything salvageable from this drone? Did you manage to get any of the batteries or anything other than the SD card, or was that it was a complete write-off?
The SD card and I think the ND filter. Everything else was a goner. But to be fair, it was my insurance company. Shout out to Moonrock. They've just made it an absolute breeze to sort of work with. I called them up. I was like, this is what's happened, but luckily I have the drone as evidence. Rather than, I did ask, what would happen if I don't have the drone, if I can't show you the evidence of what's happened. It's like, it's going to be sort of a proof, evidence, trust game. But yeah, they made it pretty pain-free, which I'm thankful for, and were able to have new drone in sort of 72 hours or so, which was good service.
Shows obviously the benefit of having insurance then over sort of just winging it, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for commercial operations, you by law you have to have insurance. But yeah, definitely finally makes it worth it after all those years of paying your insurance to be able to make a claim, and they make it pretty pain-free. It's handy.
Yeah. So obviously we've sort of briefly touched on your Inspires that you have. You've obviously got 2 of them. I know you've got quite a long kit list, so do you want to run through what drone kit that you have and sort of when you tend to choose each thing and where it sort of falls into its place?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's not too extensive, but yeah. So in terms of what I actually own, so I freelance for other drone companies as well, and sometimes I use their equipment. But in terms of what I have in my fleet, I've got a couple of the Inspire 2s, like you said. We've got there's two different cameras that you can get on it. We've got the X7, which is a Super 35 sensor, and then we've got a couple of the X5S, which are the Micro Four Thirds. And then below that, we've then got the DJI Phantom 4 Pro, which I've had for years. It needs to be replaced, really. I was thinking like the Mavic 2 Pro sort of area, but then I'm like, I know the second I buy it, the Mavic 3 will come out, so I'm holding off from that. And then that's about it in terms of the regular camera drone stuff. Next sort of the newer thing has been, like you said, like the FPV drones. So yeah, the racing style that are sort of racing drones which are built for filming, I'd say. So not as punchy and agile, but yeah, just designed sort of 5-inch quadcopters built to carry a GoPro, and that's been sort of used more so for like the action sport sort of things, or using quite a few on like automotive shoots recently. It seems to be pretty popular with that. But obviously the downside at the moment is just that it is a GoPro, so it's okay quality, but ideally we want to be pushing a bit further. So I guess the next step up would be going down the sort of medium to heavy lift FPV drones. I don't know if you've seen them, that are sort of carrying the Komodos and Blackmagics, and yeah, they look pretty appealing. But at the same time, these FPV drones are a lot more manual, as you'd say. You haven't got these collision avoidance sensors, and return to home is, the drones that do have it with the FPV are, it's nothing like a DJI return to home. It's a very much last ditch resort to try and get your drone back with that. But yeah, I think that's what I've been working towards. But at the moment, just still improving my skill set to work up to that point.
Yeah, I mean, I was chatting with a guy a couple of episodes back, and we were sort of discussing how the original DJI stuff, such as the Phantom 1, is sort of at the level of the FPV stuff now. So that sort of analog transmission and the quality that you see when you're flying, and you sort of strap a GoPro on the bottom and sort of hope for the best. But I think obviously DJI have got the sort of their digital transmission technology out, which is great, and I think that's probably going to be the way forwards. And obviously once DJI start doing something, everyone seems to follow. But I think with sort of digital transmission, I think that is the way forwards. And I think FPV, I've said it before on the podcast, that FPV is definitely the way that everyone seems to be going at the minute. So sort of how long have you been flying FPV, and where did you sort of start out with that?
Yeah, I started dabbling with it maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, but I really didn't get any traction with it, and I sort of wish I did now, just seeing like how much it's blown up. But it was, in a way, that was the one sort of good thing that came out of the whole COVID lockdown thing for me in the first place, was just being able to sort of crack on with that, because it is a pretty time hungry hobby, or avenue to go down, just because you're, in terms of how long you're flying it versus how long it's on the workbench, and you're sort of building them, fixing them, tweaking them, it's a lot more than you are actually flying. So it's a big sort of time sink, but that's what sort of lockdown gave me, and that's how I sort of spent my first lockdown, really, was just plowing the hours into that. And so yeah, that was, to answer your question, that was that's a year now, isn't it? So yeah, about a year now that I've been actually pushing it.
So is your sort of FPV drone, is that a custom build one that you've built from scratch, or did you sort of buy a pre-built one and then just swap bits out as and when sort of damages happen?
Yeah, so the first one I actually learned on was what they call like bind and fly setup, so pre-built drone basically, and that was, I think that's a good way of going about it in the first place, just because it gives you an idea of how an FPV drone does fly and how it's supposed to feel, or a rough idea at least. And then so that was good to practice on, and then after that I then moved on to doing a custom build, which you sort of you specify the components that you want to suit your needs, and you take it from there, really.
So was your sort of, obviously I know you said you started with FPV sort of at the beginning of lockdown, was that something that you wanted to pursue yourself, or was that something that clients were starting to ask you for, and you sort of thought it was a good investment of your time to sort of be able to offer that in addition to everything else that you do?
A bit of both, really. It was FPV is just fun. It's really, really good fun, and like the other drone stuff is, although the jobs can be fun and flying them, for me personally, I don't find it so fun anymore. Like in the early days I did. But then doing the FPV stuff sort of re-sparked the sort of the excitement for flying, just because, you know, there's a lot more sort of opportunities of cool shots that you can get, different types of shots, and it's been fun experimenting with that. Still is now, a year later. But yeah, on the other side, yeah, clients are asking for a bit more, so I'm a bit I wouldn't say late to the party, but I'm definitely not at the beginning. There are a bunch of guys that are absolutely killing it. They're doing really well, and yeah, they've sort of, I guess, shown what are possible with drones, with these FPV drones. So I'm sort of just jumping on the bandwagon with that, really, just to be able to sort of add it in addition to flying these other drones. So at the moment for jobs, I've been sort of mostly it's flying the Inspire and stuff, but then as a bolt-on, being able to do the FPV as well. So it's a nice little addition to be able to offer.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose it's sort of, if the clients maybe haven't specified it and you've got the drone with you and you're able to sort of show them what's capable, it maybe opens up your sort of future with them with FPV stuff, and obviously markets yourself as being able to do that and shows your sort of versatility, which is obviously important.
Yeah, exactly.
So moving on to sort of how you first got to sort of where you are now, did you start off with sort of remote control helicopters and sort of planes sort of a little while ago and then moved more recently into drones? Sort of how did your drone journey come about?
Yeah, I never really started with I mean, I had like remote control helicopters, the odd one as a kid, but, you know, nothing serious. But I was always, I guess, a bit of a geek and enjoyed the sort of gadgety remote control stuff. I got into it for sort of an interest in film and TV rather than an interest in remote control stuff. I love the idea of aerial filming from like helicopters. So you sort of see the things on David Attenborough sort of flying over plains of Africa, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I'd love to film something like that one day. And then I was looking into it, and I was like, wow, helicopters are an expensive world, and I don't have any links in that world. And this is when I'm sort of 18 or so, so just finishing college and trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. And yeah, came across the idea of drones. There are a few guys, mainly in the States, that I sort of saw their work, and I was like, oh, this is pretty incredible. These sort of single rotor remote control helicopters with a DSLR attached to it. That was groundbreaking at the time. Like the footage that you'd be getting from it wasn't so great, but it was definitely showing potential. And that's sort of how I then started with the drone thing. It's like I had the DJI Phantom 1. So I missed the whole rigmarole of the nightmares of the drones before that, where it was really trial and error and it was really stabbing in the dark. So I sort of started at the beginning of the DJI era, the Phantom 1, sort of strapping a GoPro to it. You don't have a video feed, so you can't see what you're filming or any telemetry. But to be able to put a GoPro in the sky, that was terrible footage, but I sort of saw potential in it and it was exciting. So yeah, started following it from there, and then started to I reached out to a few companies in the UK that were offering it. I only heard back from one company, which is Chris Bates at Skyhook. So yeah, thanks to him, I got a lot to be grateful for. He basically brought me on to sort of a work experience on the first time. I guess we hit it off, and then so then once I got my commercial operation, my permission for aerial work at the time, just like the PFCO back then. I then started to sort of pilot for him a lot more, and that's how I sort of then started to get into the commercial side of things. I started off wanting to offer drone filming as like sort of in the form of a company, like many drone companies are in the UK, to have multiple pilots and camera operators. Figured out that wasn't really for me. I'd never run a business before. Figured out I wasn't very good at it. So I took a month off, sort of sabbatical, and sort of reevaluated, and then came back and was like, okay, I'm going to try offering it as like a freelance sort of service. So going to these existing drone companies and saying, hey, if you need, like most of them have a pilot already, so I'd just be saying, if you need a backup pilot, if you fall sick or just get double booked or anything, that's sort of the gap I'd fill. And then since then, I've sort of just grown sort of the client base and built just good relationships with people more than anything. To be not just sort of good at your job, but to be a trusted operator, really, because that's a lot of the game, is just be able to provide a good service, not only from technical standpoint, but just to be nice and I guess easy to work with as well, and to be able to trust, for these companies to trust an operator to go out on a job, to represent them well and not to steal their clients. And that's sort of the service I've been providing. And in the early days, before it was sort of full-time enough to be earning a decent wage off it, I was also working at a drone shop, RC Geeks. They're based down in Crawley. So worked with them for a couple of years, mainly just as on the repair desk. So I'll just be, people will bring in all their crash drones, and you hear some good, interesting crash stories from that. And yeah, just repairing drones there and doing sort of unboxing reviews of the latest DJI tech. And then sort of left there in 2016, I think it was, once work was sort of busy enough to be full-time piloting.
I mean, you sort of mentioned briefly there about how sort of what you offer is representing yourself well for a company. And I think a lot of times when you see, we touched on sort of like David Attenborough and that kind of thing. When you see those kind of drone shots, they're not necessarily the most complex of shots, but it's not always about that for professional work. I mean, obviously the FPV stuff is maybe a little bit more complex, but it's not all about, when you become a professional pilot, it's obviously, it's how you represent yourself as well as the skills that you're able to offer. And obviously that then comes down to whether people want to hire you or not. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, there's so much more to it than just what, I guess, how the results that you get in terms of what goes out on TV. But yeah, like you said, just to be easy to work with, especially of those, so the longer shoots where it's more than just a day. You don't want to be that guy on set that people are struggling to get on with.
Yeah. I mean, I had a brief look at your website before, obviously, we came on and chatted today, and you've worked for a massive number of sort of big name brands. So with that kind of work, is that through working with companies that have then worked with them, or is that you sort of approaching the company directly and offering your services and it being sort of directly through them?
Yeah, so that list on there are just productions that I've worked on. So the majority is through my sort of the freelance sort of side of things. So these drone companies that have these contracts or landed these jobs and have asked me to go pilot for them. That's where that list and the show reel as well. None of my show reel or that client list would be possible without these drone companies that I work with.
Yeah. I mean, just looking at the list as well, a lot of the brands on there, well, I'd say not a lot, a majority of the brands that are listed on there seem to be sort of car companies, and sort of obviously you've listed Top Gear, BBC, Dave, and Grand Tour I noticed was on there as well. So would you say that majority of your work at the minute is more sort of car based and that kind of filming?
Well, so yeah, that is definitely sort of the avenue that I've sort of pushed myself down. But at the same time, it is like with social media and things, you only get to see what that person wants you to see. So I'm not just filming car commercials and things all the time. Like there's a bunch of other sort of less exciting things that I'm filming, which I don't want to be raving about, because that's not the sort of avenue I want to be going down. I think it's you attract what you put out. So I think if you're showing what sort of automotive jobs I've been working on, and that's then attracts more of the same sort of stuff. Whereas I don't put any, not so much anymore like roof surveys and things, but sort of, I guess, less, to me, like less exciting bits I don't want to be putting on there, because that's not really what I want to be sort of putting myself forward for.
Yeah, definitely. So sort of working with those brands and that kind of thing, obviously that must have sort of taken you all over the world. So is there sort of any places that, you particularly enjoyed, obviously other than the pictures that we've sort of talked about? Is there any places that you've sort of really enjoyed shooting with and sort of you've come away with like a really good impression of it?
Yeah. A lot. There's a lot. I mean, it's been privileged to work in a lot of places. Done some expedition work in sort of Iceland and New Zealand with a good friend of mine, Jordan Rosen. And that's basically just filming these sort of outdoor apparel companies. So more often than not for sort of hiking and trail running. So that includes just hiking out with all this kit, and you're camping out, and it's just a few day excursion to shoot these products in these fairly remote areas. Outside of that, another sort of opportunity that's allowed me to travel a bunch was doing. There's a company called Fly. They're based in Sheffield, so just down the road from me here in the Peak District. They're one of the companies that I work closest with, and for I think it was only about a year or so that I was sort of fulfilling they had a contract with TUI, the travel holiday company, and basically just filming a heap of their sort of the destinations. So it would go from filming like their hotels and then the sort of activities that they offer. So imagine you go onto their website and you're like, oh, I want to go to this hotel. You watch a video of the hotel and then you're like, oh, what activities are they providing? So there'll be, safari or water sports or, these various activities that we'd then go out and film. And that was good fun to be able to travel to cool places, experience some different cultures and take part in some fun activities.
So obviously that you've sort of travelled for work and that kind of thing. How has your work sort of been affected by COVID in that sense? Obviously not being able to travel, and with the lockdowns that have sort of been enforced on the UK, being able to travel has obviously been massively reduced. So have you seen like a drop in your workload as a result of that, or have you still been sort of able to keep going with sort of UK based stuff?
Yeah, travel really ground to a halt. Done things within the UK, sort of Wales and Scotland, but yeah, outside of that, there's been nothing in the last sort of 12 months, which is understandable. But yeah, work on the whole, it's definitely sort of, I'd say, quieter. I'd say March till June, July last year, or March till June for sure, I didn't work at all. So the industry just ground to a halt. And then after that, things were able to pick up. And it's sort of, it was quite fortunate that work sort of went back to normal, essentially. If anything, I felt a bit busier, just felt like, a plug was pulled and all the work sort of came flooding back for a bit. But I find that the drone stuff is seasonal anyway. So winter is usually quieter. So sort of December, it started to quieten down again. And then, still now in January, it's fairly quiet compared to what it usually is, or on top of what it usually is. And I'm expecting it sort of will be for February as well, but then going into March, pick up again. But yeah, thankfully the UK government have I'm just self-employed. So they've got the self-employed support scheme, which has been pretty handy to have, just to saves any extra stress.
So sort of throughout that busier time that you obviously said that it sort of comes in waves, do you find yourself turning down maybe less exciting jobs for yourself and sort of going with maybe ones that you want to sort of progress more in?
Yeah, it's again, just it's like in the busier times it's easiest to sort of pick and choose. In the quieter times, so like post COVID, so end of last year, I was sort of just taking on everything and anything I could get. But yeah, in general, you can be fairly picky, but at the same time, I'm not particularly business driven. I'm not in it for the business side of it so much. I'm not just trying to get all the money I can. So I'd happily, if I want to go climbing or something at the weekend, I'll happily sort of turn down some work just to be out in the peaks climbing with some mates. So yeah, it's not everything, the money side of it, but it's definitely means to an end.
Yeah, definitely. So sort of finishing up then, is there any tips that you could offer for sort of people that are just sort of starting out? Obviously, I know you're maybe less sort of photography driven and more sort of, obviously, as we've discussed, the sort of your interest is from drones for TV and film. So is there sort of any tips that you can offer for people that maybe want to pursue that kind of avenue rather than sort of more traditional photography?
I guess just get out there and create stuff, really, because there's nothing speaks louder than the results that you get, and the shots that you're able to get. So just get out and film. And that's the nice thing with, let's say the nice thing, but one of the benefits of these sort of the quieter times of not being able to work is that you can you're able to get out and shoot more. And that's what I found with the FPV stuff. Like I said earlier, I also started this series called FPV Friday, which is something that I'd post, not every Friday, but I'd try and post videos frequently on Fridays that are FPV related. And that was sort of a good, it was a sort of a deadline for myself, an objective to try and put something out that was FPV related, and just creating that content and then putting it out online, I use pretty much solely Instagram. Just it sort of acts as it's like a double-edged sword. It's like an ongoing portfolio rather than just making a show reel, which I do recommend. Show reels are pretty important for just having a collective of your work to show off to potential clients, especially. But Instagram acts as like a rolling portfolio, so you can show different projects that you've done, and people just browse through it pretty easily. And it's a good way of being able to be spotted and recognized. And the number of clients that I've made that I found through Instagram, I mean, I couldn't count, but it's plenty has come through it. So definitely don't underestimate the power of social media, and just creating. I think it's pretty key.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for taking time out of your day. It's been really nice chatting and obviously hearing all of your stories and that kind of thing. Do you want to just remind everybody how they can find you on Instagram and obviously through your website as well?
Sure. Yeah. Instagram is Phil Harris Co. And the website is philharris.co.
Cool. Well, as I say, thank you very much. And I hope everything goes well in the future with all of your drone work.
Cheers, Alex. I appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Cool.